Hi everyone, it's Nicole here from Mama Elephant today with a faux watercolor stenciled square backdrop or background for these Cupcake Wishes images. I am not super great with watercoloring, but I love watercolored looks. So I thought I would try something kind of fun today, and I have got a background created with a sweet feline die cut, and I am going to tape the Simon Says stamp grid stencil in place, and then I'm going to add color with dye inks and the life-changing brushes. And I'm kind of going around randomly, but also at a diagonal, if that makes sense. I want this to look very much like a watercolored little palette background, whatever you want to call it. But by taping my stencil kind of down in place and then these life-changing brushes, they very much keep that color in the little spot. I absolutely love these brushes for applying ink over a stencil. I feel like they don't pull the stencil as much as some other products might. I am using Lawn Fawn dye inks. The yellow colors I chose to use today are Butter and Sunflower, and the orange colors I'm using are Peach Fuzz and Carrot. I'm using about 2 shades per color family until we get to the blues and the greens, and those are going to have a couple more, but everything else has got about 2 colors. And you can see that I started in the middle with my yellow and I'm building out from there. With over to the left, we're going to have oranges, reds, pinks, and purples. In fact, part of that got cut out as my video camera shut off. So there was some plastic flamingo and ballet slippers were the pink colors, and the red was lobster. My purple colors that I'm now working on to fill in the rest of the left side of my background are fresh lavender and juice box. I did have to clean my brushes partway through. These are some of the smaller life-changing blending brushes. Probably the smallest ones in there. They're the circle shape and they work fantastic for little areas like this. I'm absolutely fine with a little overlap of colors. In fact, I think that looks more watercolored in this case. So if you overlap some of the sections, it does work out really well. But I did try to keep the color in the smaller sections as much as possible. And then we'll move on to the other side. For quick color changes, because I usually wash these out with some hot water, I actually just sprayed a little stamp cleaner on a microfiber cloth and wiped the tip of these off so that I could really quickly move on to another color. And I did start at the middle of my palette with the yellows, but part of the reason for that was I knew that was going to be my lightest color and I didn't want to cross-contaminate with darker colors. So it was easiest to start with those yellows. Now we're going to move into greens, and I started with Minty Fresh, and then we'll move to more, which is more aqua, and then we'll move to more green with celery stick and jalapeno. Again, kind of a random assortment, but keeping it at a diagonal. There was really not a huge rhyme or reason to which sections I did. I just didn't want to do too many close to each other in a very straight line. I wanted this to be a little more organic. So here's the celery stick, and we'll finish with a little jalapeno ink next before we move on to the blue shades that we'll be using. When I pick up the color with these brushes, I often tap off the color on a scrap piece of paper, or in this case, that Post-it tape I'm using to hold down my backgrounds is going to work great. And then I take it to my paper so that I don't get too many blobs of dark color. There are a few in there, but I actually ended up liking it, and I think as the color dries a little bit and is absorbed into the paper, it ends up looking okay. So let's move to some blues or aqua with Mermaid first. And that's going to be a great transition from green to blue. And then we will pull in some Moonstone and Forget-Me-Not, which have kind of become two of my favorite blue colors. Moonstone first, which I thought this just picked up a little too much aqua, so I'm going to grab my cleaner and microfiber cloth and just clean the tip of that off really quick before I go back. And I'm going to pull in that Moonstone ink now, and that's much, much better. And then finally, we will move on to the Forget-Me-Not, which is going to be more of the blue. Both of these are a little bit more cool tone, or maybe not as royally blue as Fish Tank from Lawn Fawn would be, which is another favorite ink color, but I opted not to use it today. I really like how this background turned out. So it looks pretty good here. I'm really excited to pull the stencil off and see what is underneath. And you can see the stencil stayed really well in place with just a couple pieces of Post-it tape, and that blending brush is not moving it. It worked really well. So just go over a few more little areas. I make sure that I have that covered. And then I'm going to simply remove my stencil. And look at that awesome background. I did tape off the two long edges with the scallop so that the ink didn't go all the way to the edge, and that left it nice and white. So here is my background. Let's move on to creating our images that we'll be placing on top of this really awesome watercolor looking stenciled background. These are from the Cupcake Wishes Mama Elephant stamp set. We're going to start with the solid images first. This is the bottom of the cupcakes, the cupcake liners. And I opted to stamp these in some of the same colors I used for the background. The yellow is sunflower ink. The pink we're using is Ballet Slippers. I am using a Misty. I have not stamped this image before, and I did need to stamp it a couple times, and I wanted to make sure I got a really crisp image. After I have stamped all of these, the last one is Minty Fresh, that really fun kind of cool aqua. I want to add some shading to these as I'm going to be coloring the rest of my images in with Copic markers, and they will have shading. My favorite tool to add shading over a die stamped image is with Polychromos colored pencils. I am using a couple of shades per color family and per cupcake liner and adding color down near the bottom. This gives the image much more the same look as what the top of the cupcake will be and have that beautiful shading down here. I didn't extend it all the way to the top, so it still retains some of the original stamped color. And I'm not going to do tons of blending. I want that kind of ombre effect of light to dark on all three cupcake liners. So there's the minty colored one. The colors I used are listed across the top of the screen in case you want to know exactly which colors of Polychromos I used. And then for the yellow, I used a yellow and an orange to add in my shading. The yellow's just deep and dark enough that that orange works really well with the yellow. This is a fairly light orange, so it looks really good with the yellow. And then finally, we're going to have our pink cupcake liner, which we will use a couple of shades of pink on this one. If you ever think that the colored pencil lines are too harsh or you want to blend it out even more, you could always do that with some Gamsol and a stump pencil. I opted not to do that today, but that's always an option as well. And I'm making sure and leaving those little white areas white on our cupcake liners almost as highlights. Going over the darker pink coloring with my lighter pink. A very sharp colored pencil is very helpful when coloring in small areas like this, and I always keep my pencil sharpener right on hand. Now I've got the top of my cupcakes. We're using all 3 images from the Cupcake Wishes stamp set. The bear, the cat, and the unicorn. Plus we're going to be using the little cupcake topper and stick in the top of one of the cupcakes. Included in this stamp set are numbers and even the letters H and I to spell hi. So you could customize your card with numbers for anyone's birthday, which is really fun. I'm starting with the bear with E40, 43, and 44, and then we're going to add some pink to his cheeks with R21. And to continue with our tone-on-tone look, the top of this cupcake is colored with G00, 02, and 09. Leaving kind of the center area a little bit lighter, blending out and shading with our markers, and then adding some dot detail to give it that sprinkles or sugared look with my darkest marker. We're going to add even more to that here in a little bit. For the pink cupcake topper, I'm using our 30, 32, and 35. This gives a kind of a peachy pinky red, but it works really nicely with the pink color we used for the bottom of the cupcake, and it ties in nicely with our colorful rainbow background. Same thing as before, where the dark colors are much more around the outside edges of our frosting, and then blend it out to light in the center for nice highlight, and then adding in some dot detail for the sprinkled or sugared effect with our darkest markers. I left the lighter areas open or unsprinkled to continue with that highlighted look. Our yellow cupcake frosting is Y11, 19, and 08. And we're going to follow the same thing for this one. Once I have this blended out, it's time to color in our remaining 2 critters, starting with our unicorn first. I wanted to keep him looking kind of white with colorful unicorn horn and hair. So we're going to use warm grays for the unicorn. I also added R35 to the tongues sticking out on the unicorn and the cat. And then we're going to use a variety of bright colors for the horn, the tail, and the mane, and some blue violets for the wings on the unicorn. Not a ton of color shows on this, but we want to have little pops here and there that poke out. For the cat, I want to just use some colors I already have out and make him like a little gray striped kitty. So I'm going to use warm gray 0, 0, and 3, and then pull in some warm gray 7. I'll even draw in some little stripes on his head after I've got all of my shading done. I did add pink cheeks to the unicorn, and I will be adding pink cheeks to the cat as well. It depends on the pink color I use as far as how dark the base is. So on the bear I used R21, I'll use R21 on the cat, or R30 I guess I used on the cat, and I used R00 for the unicorn. Once my images are cut out, I'm going to take a black gel pen and add detail to the eyes so that they really pop. The images will all be adhered with foam adhesive to give them a little definition from the busy background. I'm not going to take the foam adhesive all the way to the bottom of the frosting piece so it can slightly overlap the cupcake wrapper liner. The image in the center was adhered first, and then we're going to slightly tuck the 2 images on either side underneath the first one to give it the look of this little grouping of cupcakes. These are such cute images and great for all kinds of birthday cards for anyone, depending on what colors you use. The sentiment for this stamp set, or for this card rather, was from the Mama Elephant Birthday Messages stamp set. I stamped a greeting reading "Did somebody say cake?" using black ink, and then die cut it with a sweet feline die strip. We're going to pop that up underneath the cupcakes with foam adhesive as well. To embellish the cupcakes, I'm going to take Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard, and over the darker areas on each of the cupcakes, so not where the highlighted area is, but where I added the dot detail with the Copic markers, we're going to apply a thin layer of this Nuvo Crystal Drop that's this iridescent, sparkly, glittery look so that the cupcakes all look sugared. I love to do this on cupcake images or other images that require that sugared look. I think it adds the perfect finishing touch, adds fantastic sparkle and shine. Because we're not applying this in drops and we're doing a nice thin layer, it should dry fairly quickly. I would give it probably a good hour to completely dry, and as always with Nuvo, I would probably wait a day or a good 24 hours before putting this in an envelope to mail it, just to be on the safe side. Some little white dots were added with a white pen to the cheeks on all of the critters. I'm also going to take glossy accents and go over the tongues on the cat and the unicorn, just tiny little droplets there. The cupcake topper is going to be colored with some shades of blue, and then the stick with a couple shades of brown, B01 and B04, and then E43 and 44. For the cupcake topper, since I used a darker color combination, I opted to stamp a sentiment from the Cupcake Wishes stamp set with clear embossing ink and emboss this with white embossing powder. I chose the sentiment Cupcake Wishes, but there are many to choose from in this stamp set, so it can say several different things. You could even put one of these in each of the cupcakes if you wanted to. Once these images are cut out, I'm going to glue those to the card and to the center cupcake on my card and adhere it with foam adhesive. Just at the top. The stick itself is going to be glued to the top of the cupcake with a little Gina K Connect glue. The final thing I'm going to do before adhering this to my white sidefold card base is take this little set of hearts, which you can use as sprinkles on your cupcakes, but I'm going to scatter them throughout the background in a few places using some of those same dye inks that I used before. Some Minty fresh ink was used to stamp these hearts, and I didn't quite get it stamped very well the first time, so I just went ahead and stamped that again. I'm using an acrylic block. I didn't use the Misty for this. We'll stamp some more with Forget-Me-Not ink, Ballet Slippers ink, Carrot ink as well, in just the few places, and it adds a great little accent to the background of our card design. After we have our scattering of hearts in the background, we can go ahead and adhere this panel to a white sidefold card base. I went ahead and adhered it to a white base to finish my design. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this birthday card featuring new stamps from the Mama Elephant March 2019 release. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Mama Elephant that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.